Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is titled, All People Are Motivated. A common question I get in workshops and coaching sessions goes something like this. What do I do about this one person on my team who is totally unmotivated? Sometimes it's phrased more this way. How do I motivate so-and-so to do blank? And the key point to keep in mind here in terms of understanding human motivation and framing the answer to this question is that just because a person isn't motivated to do what you want them to do does not mean that they are unmotivated. In fact, they are motivated to do what they want to do, even if what they want to do looks like nothing to you. For example, a person sitting on the couch is motivated to sit on the couch. Not a workplace behavior we want. And we have to acknowledge that that is a form of motivation because they are doing something. So the conclusion here is that there are no unmotivated people. All people are motivated to do something for some reason. And your job as a leader is to figure out how to tie their personal motivation to do what needs to be done for the business or organization. Now, a little sidebar here. I'm going to touch on a topic that there is absolutely no way I can cover all the subtlety and ins and outs. And in fact, I'm not even going to pretend that I know all of the subtleties and ins and outs because it's such a big, complicated subject. I can't touch on every nuance in 10 minutes. I can only draw broad strokes, big picture kind of ideas. So part of this little sidebar comment is to acknowledge that there are times when there is just a bad fit between the person and the job. It happens. I acknowledge that. And my job as a leader then is really to figure out a way to move them to a different role, to reassign their role, or possibly to manage them out of the organization. Now, that last option is not a preferred option. It is an option on the table as sort of a last-ditch effort. And another idea is this, that if too many people on my team, if it's not one person, but it's like 3 or 4 people I'm having to struggle with, then I got to consider that it's not them that is the problem. I need to really consider my hiring practices or my job assignment or task assignment practices. I have to re-examine my expectations. Maybe I have to re-examine the leadership environment. If it's broader stroke than just one person or 2 people out of 10, and even 1 or 2 out of 10 is a relatively high percentage, by the way. But if it's more than that, then I really have to reconsider other things besides the person. And a comment about the whole topic of human motivation. As I already said, it's a huge, incredibly complicated topic. Some motivators are internal. They come from within the person. It's based on the person's personal wishes, desires, values, goals, all these kinds of things. Some motivators are external. They come from external pressures like rewards and punishments, which I think probably I should define briefly here just to make sure we're on the same page. A punishment really is classically defined as anything I get that I don't want. It could include things like physical or emotional pain. It could include the loss of something I want that's either physical or emotional. It could include lots of things. It could be loss of time off. A whole bunch of different things could be punishment. Anything I get that I don't want is punishment. Reward is anything I get that I do want. It could be monetary reward or time off. These are things that are commonly thought about in terms of a workplace setting, but it's also the opportunity to work on something I enjoy or a feeling of satisfaction or a feeling of reward or feeding a relational need also would be a reward because it's something I want. The one thing we have to do as leaders is to think more broadly about classical things like time off and money and basically punishment or disciplinary practices, things like that. Those are tools in our toolbox, And there's a lot more out there to think about in terms of what really drives human motivation. We get beyond simplistic assessments and think more broadly about the people on my team and really try to understand them as much as I can. So we get back to the starting question. What do I do about this one person on my team who is totally unmotivated? Well, part of the problem with that question is it carries an assumption that you are the one doing the motivating, which gets back to the point that I made at the beginning, that all people are motivated, and it's my job to figure out what that motivation is. It's my job to tie their personal motivation to what needs to be done for the organization. So this idea of can I motivate or can you motivate another person? Well, yes, I can. It's external. It's motivation applied by an external force or an external agent. It works. It has limited effectiveness, though, both in terms of longevity and impact. A couple of reasons for that. One is even when it starts with positive intention, it can drift in the direction of negative, and so we have to be really careful about that drift. It frequently moves in the direction of really more kind of a punishment mindset. Even if it doesn't start there, it often winds up there. And it's what kind of punishment can I apply for not doing what I want done? Or maybe what reward can I offer? Or can they lose, which is sort of a punishment, if they don't do what I want them to do. So it's not 100% bad to think in terms of what can I do externally to motivate another person. Not 100% bad. I just have to recognize it has serious limitations, and then it leans in the direction of negative if that's the only tool in your toolbox. It also runs the risk of creating a highly transactional type of relationship, more of the I'll do more of blank if you'll give me blank type of relationship, rather than this internal drive for people to do and achieve more because of their own internal drives and satisfaction needs. So does the idea of trying to motivate another person work? Well, yeah, it does to some extent. And is it okay to use it on occasion? Sure, it's okay to think in those terms and use that as part of your toolbox. Is it the ideal scenario? Not really. Not really. That's not our aspirational goal. Back to one of my original conclusions. There are no unmotivated people, and all people are motivated to do something for some reason. And my job, or your job as a leader, is to figure out what that motivation is and how to tie that to what needs to be done for business or organizational needs. So I'll give you two examples. One is completely silly, just to make a point, and the other is a little more practical. The first example is a person who watches cat videos all day is motivated to watch cat videos. Now, it's clearly not what we want them to do at work, and still it is motivation to do something. I also have no great words of wisdom for how to turn the motivation to watch cat videos into doing something productive at work or for the organization. Another example, and one that's probably a little closer to what we want to think about as a leader, is a person who chooses one type of task or project in preference to the one that you really want them to work on. So we find them working on what we might call secondary items instead of primary items. Just one example of the kind of thing you might see. Well, if you see this tendency, then what I would suggest is look for what's happening in this, what you would call a secondary or lower priority item on your task list or on the project list for the team, and see what is it about this type of task or work or outcome or result that stimulates this person to want to do that task. That is a clue to what motivates them. And then if you can figure out a way to tie this reward that they get for doing the secondary item to the primary item, then you might motivate them to choose that one primarily. And if you've done it that way, then you have found the internal motivator that drives them to choose that task rather than feel like they have to do that task. Again, I have to offer a sidebar comment. Is there a time and place for directly pointing out that this is a primary task and effectively driving the person to do that? Does that situation exist? Of course it does. Just be careful that that's not the only tool you use, is to be highly directive and driving them towards a task. A more subtle approach and an approach that has longer positive impact, longer lasting positive impact, is to find the thing that encourages them to choose it on their own rather than feeling like they had to do it. Find the thing that is their motivator that they see, rather than you applying a motivator all the time. Ideally, perfect utopian world, I would like to get myself out of the picture as much as possible and create work environments where people just love to do what they want to do. Yes, I acknowledge that's a utopian view. Yes, I acknowledge that probably we're not going to achieve that with perfection. It doesn't change the idea that that's the idea I have in mind as I'm trying to work with my team. Because I think if I'm moving in that direction, it reduces the number of times I have to rely on negative motivators. Okay, will I have to use negative motivators? Of course I will. I just don't want it to be my primary source of motivation. Now, where can we look to figure out a person's internal motivations? Well, the DISC model, I've talked about that in several episodes. So DISCpersonalitytesting.com. Check there. You can have people take assessments. You can learn about the DISC model. You can have your team learn about the DISC model. You can have conversations around the DISC model. That is one way to understand another person's internal motivations, although it's not the only way. Another thing to look at is the types of projects they gravitate to when they get to choose for themselves. Like when they're not externally directed to choose a task, what do they choose to work on? If they have a choice between two different projects or tasks to work on, which ones do they choose in preference? There's something about that motivates them to choose that one. It's also possible that in the one they don't choose, there's a punishment for doing that one that causes them to not want to do that one. So there's like comparison between what do they choose versus what do they not choose. Give you a clue for the types of things that motivate this person. And so, for example, do they like fixing processes or generating quick wins? Do they like working on things that allow them to work alone and take their time analyzing details, or do they prefer to engage with people and solve problems in a collaborative way? Do they enjoy engaging with people or withdrawing and working alone? And these are the kinds of things, and the list of questions you could ask is actually longer than that. It's just kind of get you started in the right direction. What do they choose or what do they not choose? And what does that tell me about what motivates this person? Another place to look is if you really get to know your team, think about the kind of things they do at home or away from work. What do their outside of work leisure and volunteer activities say about the types of things, issues, values, projects that motivate them? What kind of things do they like to work on when they have complete freedom to choose? Also a clue to their motivation. And then you can take all of these different pieces of information and form a better, more rounded, still incomplete, and more rounded picture of what this person's motivation is. And then look for ways to tie those motivators to the things that need to be done. And they will then tend to choose to do the things that need to be done in preference to other things. They will become motivated if we can find that fit. So what's the job of a leader? Take the time to figure out internal motivators for the people on your team. Get the idea out of your head that there are unmotivated people. Remember that all people are motivated to do something, and then do the best you can within the limits of the scope of the job description and the resources you have available to connect their internal motivators to the job that needs to be done. If you do that, you'll find ways to engage with your team. They'll be motivated. They'll be, if not excited, at least pleasantly engaged in doing tasks. And if you'll do that, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.